Hi there, it's Kevin with the Rogue Market here with an analysis video for the Zendikar Rising Commander deck lists. So before I get into the analysis, I just want to give a quick update of what's been going on here at GoneRogueGames/Rogue Deck Builder/Rogue Market. So basically, the good news is I have been just very busy with the business aspect of things and haven't had time to really churn out the content that I'd like to turn out. The good news though, the other good news is I do want to get back to the more market end of Magic the Gathering, whether it be speccing on cards, doing the rogue roundups, or just these analysis videos. I actually still want to take another look back at Double Masters and see where it's at. And so be looking forward to those videos. I'm going to try to keep myself to a schedule of producing videos before I go to the store. So this one's going to be a kind of short and sweet one for Zendikar Rising Commander deck list and what my overall thoughts of this product are. So first of all, you have to judge a product based upon kind of three things: the supply of it, the demand of it, and the price point of it. So the supply, of course, is how many they're going to print of this. Demand is really the contents of the cards and how many people actually want this product. And the price point is how much they will be anchoring the actual price, so the MSRP or the distributor price of how much this is going to cost. So first, let's talk about that. Zendikar Rising Commander deck lists are going to cost stores anywhere from between, I would say, $70 and $75 for 6 decks. So there's your price point that you can anchor the contents of these cards. Now, there's no such thing as EV in these type of products. It is just a set list of cards. You get that set list of cards, and that will be the value of the cards that are contained in the deck lists or in the decks themselves. Supply for these tend to be pretty high. So they print these I would say for the life of Zendikar, which tends to be until the next set comes out. And so if there is a lot of demand for these, they do tend to get reprints. Sometimes those reprints can be very slow, like Brawl. And I actually am comparing this product very similarly to Brawl because the deck lists seem, of course, there are more cards in these Commander deck lists, but it's very similar to the overall goal of Brawl. The contents are very similar. There aren't shocklands in this, which I think was a mistake for this particular product, is not having some sort of mana base that will be able to retain value, but we'll get into that when we get into that. And so the contents, of course, will then determine demand. And I actually do think the demand of these are going to be higher than the predecessors of these decks. So these replace the Planeswalker decks. The biggest problem with Planeswalker decks is the contents in them were pretty bad. They were meant for brand new players. They didn't want to have any sort of rules that were very complex. And there was another factor with the price of the cards was never supposed to be worth it to buy them. I think that was a goal for Wizards of the Coast, so the Planeswalker decks didn't just get bought out for people piecing them out. They wanted them to go to new players. Now, from a store's aspect, Planeswalker decks actually do sell very well. The problem is that I feel bad selling them. Even to new players, I hate to steer them towards Planeswalker decks because they're getting a product that is basically worthless outside of just playing Planeswalker deck versus Planeswalker deck. Now, Zendikar Rising Commander deck lists, I think, are much better at targeting that new player for making an accessible product. Remember, these are half the price of what Commander Ikoria costs for a playable Commander deck. So, where do the contents end up here? Is it worth it to buy these particular products, and where do I see them going long term? The first thing I have a problem with Landswrath is the kind of cardinal sin that or the trap that I've seen Wizards of the Coast continue to fall into, and that's when they look at trying to build a deck list, they have some sort of arbitrary price. In this case, it's probably $80 is what they're looking at of secondary market value of what the contents will be worth when they actually made this deck. And the issue with that is then they get stuck in this loop of printing newer cards because newer cards are cheaper to include in the deck rather than going back and finding a card that might actually work better for that particular deck. So that's the problem with when we see with like cards like Living Twister, or now in this particular deck, things like the Mending of Dominaria, is those particular cards were probably targeted for their price because they were just a rare they could throw in, it works with the deck, and they could call it good. However, it's going to really affect the ability of these cards ever having equity for future reprints. And I caution Wizards of the Coast because they're really starting to be stretched thin of cards that actually have the ability to go up in value. It's kind of a meme about Dragon's Maze, that Dragon's Maze is just a horrendous set, that it's just the worst set ever printed. But if you go back and look at Dragon's Maze, the contents of Dragon's Maze actually wasn't that bad. The biggest issue with Dragon's Maze is every stinking card has been reprinted and reprinted and reprinted. From cards like Master of Cruelties being in the guild kits, from cards even like the Voice of Resurgence was a chase card, being printed over and over in master sets, from rares that like Varel and rares like, just basically look at any rare in Dragon's Maze, and it's one of those cards that it's like, oh, this would make a cool card, cool budget card to throw in our commander, this slot in our commander deck. And so many cards in Dragon's Maze have been, if you compare Dragon's Maze with any other set in that time period, it has the most reprints over and over and over, which is funny because it's also the least sought after set. You can still get Dragon's Maze pre-release kits. You can still buy them. You can still get Dragon's Maze booster boxes for super budget because Wizards has continued to crush the equity contained in Dragon's Maze. So it's this loop that Wizard keeps getting trapped in of looking for budget cards, and then it ends up being that those cards can never go up in value because they just reprint them too quickly. So that's what I kind of see about Land's Wrath. Land's Wrath also has a little bit of a issue here with people manipulating the market. So both Omnath, Locus of Rage, and the Admonition Angel actually went up after they were spoiled in the deck. So this was, they could have actually gone up beforehand when people were like looking, it was spoiled that it was going to be a landfall deck in Naya, and Omnath and Admonition Angel were bought out before the full contents were spoiled. If that's the case, someone lost a ton of money. I think the more accurate thing, though, is someone's trying to manipulate the value of the actual Land's Wrath deck and make it seem like it was worth more than it really is, and put a bunch of these up, and then it affected the mid price of just spiking up in value. Because you look at the market price is $7, the mid price is 14. Yep, that's someone manipulating. That's someone putting like 1,000 copies up for, $500 a piece. I wish TCG Player had a better way of weeding that out, or banning sellers that actually did stuff like that, because they should be using their platform. eBay definitely got rid of some of these sellers in the past. They would create alternate accounts to put up a bunch of products they knew wouldn't sell to make the product they did want to sell actually look like a bargain buy. And it just, it's just noise, and sites don't want this sort of noise. So I wish TCG Player would figure out better ways to stop this manipulation, because so many sites use TCG Player as the anchored price. I wish other sites would actually take kind of the card sphere route and take multiple sources. I know that's hard for an algorithm to really kind of regurgitate that information, but I wish like even Goldfish could actually look at other sources and give an overall better idea of where these cards are without this sort of market manipulation that occurs. And like it's like clockwork with sets. This market manipulation occurs. So Omnath might have been just bought out before the full contents were spoiled because the market price is lower than the mid, but that's always how it works. But of course now Card Kingdom is adjusted and Omnath has gone down, down, down. All right, so that is actually, though, a good reprint for both those cards, because it does see where the demand would have been if they wouldn't have been reprinted in the set. So I think that both of them long-term are pretty good pickups if people do start to piece these out. So they buy these and piece these out. I think that those are good ones to pick up for, probably we're going to be looking at like $2 Omnaths, I would say, when the dust settles with this particular deck. It depends on how sought after this Oben Muldaya Ancestor is going to be, for how many people want to slot this in other decks. To where, of course, just buying this is the way to get it before these singles go up for sale. And so you might get a lot of products just pieced out for that reason. You're also going to get a lot of products pieced out because there are going to be speculators that are just sellers that think that it is going to be worth it. Again, if you're getting these at $70, you're looking at $12 a deck for how much it is to buy these from distributors. If you can make more than $12 back, that's just pure profit. So if you can sell like Omnath for $6 and Admonition Angel for $6, everything else is just sheer profit after that. So I'm expecting a bunch of these to be pieced out, and it's going to give a opportunity for many of these cards to be picked up for bargain. So we're talking like Mina and Den Wildborn. If this one goes down to a super low price, this one would be a great pickup. Like we're thinking like a quarter, 50 cents. And there also are quite a few uncommons that are surprisingly good if Wizards doesn't reprint them again and again and again. You have cards like Fire Wanderings. That is a popular card in Commander. You have Kodama's Reach. These ones do tend to recover after their reprintings. Look at Kodama's Reach, just a good example of a card that gets crushed after its reprint and then goes back up. It gets printed in Commander 20, 17, 16, 15, over and over and over. So this one got reprinted. This one actually didn't even go down from the Commander 2020. It still held its price. So that would be, of course, a good pickup if it gets crushed. So this is ones you definitely want to keep your eye on to see how low they go, and then pick them up for the long term. The thing I like about these uncommons and commons is they are not as hard as you think they are of getting rid of. They often are something you can find on like Channel Fireball or Card Kingdom's buy list for basically no spread. So you can pick them up on, or say you picked it up for 25 cents and they buy list it for 75 cents. There actually isn't a lot of labor involved. This is coming from someone that used to do this very, very often, playing what we call like the Card Kingdom juggle, where you would just juggle from Card Kingdom and then for store credit, and then when Card Kingdom had a sale, you'd buy everything from Card Kingdom, and then you'd rinse and repeat and just juggle with them with their own, their own system. Or you just use even other places like TCG Player, so you juggle cards for TCG Player price for something that Card Kingdom has for low, and then sell on TCG Player, and then rinse and repeat. That's actually something that can be done even with just buy listing, that I've been very successful in the past. Before the main reason I don't do speculation and cards as much as I used to, that's what people accuse me all the time of, creating these videos to create hype. I actually haven't engaged in buying and selling cards for quite a while. We're talking a year and a half, probably. I mean, I think the last major one I did was Arclight Phoenix. Of actually buying out a particular card and then reselling it. So I still like to keep, it's still a hobby. I still find this interesting. But the main reason that I haven't been engaged in this is I've moved on to greener pastures, where, running my Discord and running my Patreon is a lot more lucrative than trying to there's a lot of like labor involved in the MTG finance, in the juggling of cards, especially when you're looking for in the range of 20 or 20 cent to, $5 cards. There's a lot of labor into that, but it can be worth it. And it is fun if people like to do that. I always talk about this as more of a managing your collection than becoming a millionaire. So take that for what it's worth. So anyway, getting back to this, there's also some other cards that have fared well long-term in this Landsrath deck. There's a lot of ramp. There's a lot of cards that have a lot of overlap in other decks that have definitely proven themselves in Commander. Things like Sun Titan. This card does tend to get reprinted like crazy, but Sun Titan does tend also to rebound. And I think these are going to be good to look at these particular cards and pick them up as they come down in price. So our Revelation, there goes one of my specs. It gets wrecked. This is a card that I went all in on. It does get a reprint. Return of the Wild Speaker does get a reprint. If these do get crushed, these are great targets to pick up. All right, so the biggest issue, though, I do have with these decks is the mana base. You can see there's not a card that's over $1. It actually did tend to go for like Needle Spires, which is probably a card that this deck doesn't even want, because come into play tap lands in a ramp type strategy in the off color. I don't know. I just don't like Needle Spires in this particular one. And there didn't seem to be any any filter lands or they really did not give any equity in the land base, and that's very disappointing. If we take a look at the Sneak Attack deck, this one's also interesting because it actually did the opposite of the Landsrath. So Landsrath took cards that had high supply and then reprinted them. The Sneak Attack took ones that had relatively low supply and reprinted them. So you have like Una, Queen of Fae. We have the Sig, River Cutthroat. These are high value cards. These definitely should get crushed, but this one is pretty good value off the gate of people that do want to be picking up these particular cards. So I think that if people are buying these decks to piece out, this is going to be the one that is going to be easier to do that short term. However, long term, I would say that the Landfall deck might outperform the Sneak Attack deck long term. Again, they did tend to pick cards that have been reprinted a lot, but tend to recover. Like Zulaport Cutthroat has been printed so many times, yet it continues to flirt with that dollar price tag. So these are good cards if you can get in on like a quarter. It has the Lazav Dimir Mastermind. That's kind of a dud of one. But even Consuming Aberration gets printed a lot, and this is a card that does tend to rebound. And many of these other cards, Notion Thief, there's another Dragon's Maze card I keep talking about that gets reprinted. But these are all good cards that have proven themselves to be able to recover. So I do like this one as well long term. I think that they did a pretty good job. Like the only complaint I'm having is the mana base. I think that they could have been a little bit less greedy on the mana base and given some sort of equity here. to make these just the perfect product. But overall, I'm actually very impressed with the Commander decks. The price point is really where I think that they are anchored perfectly. I think you'll get your value out of this for both the distributor cost or the MSRP cost of particular on what angle you're looking at for this. I think these are very playable decks. They're very upgradable decks. This is definitely things we need to look at is cards that will upgrade these budget decks, because they're not going to be like Brawl. Brawl was pointless. People bought Brawl to pick them apart to get the cards to make Commander decks. And a lot of the cards were geared more on 1 versus 1. This particular deck does have like the just kind of the nuts and bolts to get you going for a particular theme in a commander. I think that this one is easier to build as a commander deck, and I think that it's actually more interesting because you might as well scrap this landfall deck and build your own landfall deck. I think that the mana base is quite terrible to try to go into Naya, and if you actually look, there's like triples in here. This is just a mess. I get it, you have like Circuitous Route and you have Colony Heart Expedition and these type of cards to actually go grab your particular lands, but still it seems like this is a mess to try to get the color combination. I would assume that you might just be better off, scrapping and starting from square one and choosing a more streamlined theme than what this deck has to offer. But this ninjutsu type strategy, I think, is pretty decent for this rogue type strategy. And there definitely are some cards that are going to be slotted into these rogue decks that are probably going to go nuts because they work very well with this particular deck and with this particular rogue tribal theme commander. So pretty sweet with the opportunity for this. We'll have to look into that. In the comment section below, give me your favorite cards that you think are going to be just shoo-ins for this rogue base deck, and same thing with the landfall one, and maybe we'll give an update video on like the top 10 cards to invest in based upon these decks. So overall, again, to reiterate, I think both these products are actually knocked out of the parks, which is saying something coming from, Debbie Downer Kevin. Like, usually I'm very critical of Wizards of the Coast and what they actually decide to put into their products, because most of them are just so misguided. We'll have another video coming out, though, later on about the reprints, the kind of the treasure slot that the set boosters are going to offer, and just the disconnect, again, between Wizards of the Coast and whoever creates these products, because now we're seeing a lot of Masters, double Masters being reprinted, or like mystery boosters or jumpstart targets that are now also in these auxiliary slots, these reprint slots from the set boosters, which is just, Wizards just is terrible at their job. Can you please communicate? Can your departments communicate with one another? I mean, that is critical in a managing a collectible card game. You need to communicate. Tuk-Tuk's not worth anything anymore, bros. We need to find other things that haven't been reprinted to put in those auxiliary slots. I mean, it's kind of the problem with MTGO. Ugin was always a meme on MTGO because Wizards kept forgetting to take it off their treasure slot. And so Ugin, a card that was high demand, a mythic that was already reprinted many times in, here, I'll show you here, and on MTGO, end up being a worthless card because of just the supply was so hard, or so high for MTGO. So this is the issue when they. So basically, let me reiterate what this is. So set boosters are trying to take something that was done on MTGO, given a reprint auxiliary slot. So in MTGO, they're treasures. After you play an event and you win an event, you get these treasures that then you can open, and they'll have a list of cards that Wizards of the Coast has determined for the health of the game need to be included to be reprinted, so that the price point is pretty accessible. And so what they did with cards like Ugin is they saw, okay, Ugin's it's $6. It's probably a pretty good thing to put in these treasures. I can't remember when they started treasures. I believe it was bound right around here. And Ugin was put into the treasures. And what they're supposed to do is when the price crashes, then they remove them from the treasures. And then that allows the price to get some breathing room, or actually just allows their treasures to hold better equity because they could put cards that are actually valuable in them. But what they forgot is in this time period is they continued to keep it at a high rate in these treasures, and it got crushed. Ugin, which was a 2 of in Tron, and a very popular card outside of that went all the way down to 6 cents. 6 cents because they forgot to take it out of treasures, and it stayed there quite stagnant. And there are many examples of this in of them just being just absolutely terrible at managing their own treasures, and they've had some pretty big swings on the value of these cards because they haven't done it properly. And I think this is the problem now with like mystery boosters. Obviously, is the first experiment that Wizards is having with like these reprint slots. They've determined it's hard to throw reprints. Like they'd rather focus on themes for these particular decks, these commander decks, rather than focusing on, slotting a card that just needs to be reprinted. So it's like, oh man, we need another Seedborn Muse, and it doesn't really go with the theme of this. So let's just anchor it. Let's just shoe it into this commander deck, and then it just has this discombobulated feeling. So I think that Wizards is like, hey, let's just actually focus on theme for these products, and then we can get necessary reprints in things like mystery booster boxes and set boosters. And that's where now we're starting to see the issue that we have with treasures is whoever was over mystery booster boxes was looking at the exact same targets as now these set boosters or double masters or jumpstart. And it's like, and now we have these, double, triple, quadruple reprintings within a 6-month time period, which just leaves you scratching your head of what's going on at Wizard of the Coast. And they just completely crush the value. They take a $20 card and they turn it down to a $1 card, which we saw with many of the cards that were double reprinted in Mystery and 2XM. And now we're seeing like Skithrix and a few of the other cards are in this auxiliary slot, the reprint slot for these set boosters. They're going to absolutely get crushed. Anyway, that's probably a topic for another day. Well, it is a topic for another day. We'll be having that video out shortly. Again, I want to get coming back to actually focusing on this Rogue Market channel. I know a lot of you appreciate more of the spec portion of it, and I think that will make a good video for looking at potential targets for these decks. I hope you enjoyed this video. This has been Kevin with the Rogue Market. Thanks for watching.